Welcome to Innovation and Leadership. I'm Jess Larson. Today is part 2 of our interview with Anthony Lenzo.
Well, when it comes to broadcast, you have to be ready at the time that airs. There are no exceptions for the delay. So it's a matter of cracking the whip. Now, finding team members that understand that is very difficult because you can get quoted to build a website and someone is going to quote you for, I'll have that done in 2 months, and 2 months comes and goes and it's still not done.
This is another episode of our Innovation and Leadership series where we interview pro athletes, world-class musicians, CEOs, Hollywood filmmakers, and a wide variety of other high achievers. Also, I want to talk to you about one of our show's sponsors. I met these guys back on episode 6. CEO Zach Smith was telling me all about starting a skateboard company and how much he hated doing the bookkeeping for his skateboard shop, and how he really got led to start this business, Bookly, that's a hybrid combining bookkeeping software and human services. And I'll tell you why I let him become a sponsor. It's because I use their service now. I don't love paying $50 an hour for bookkeepers to do stuff that I know software could do way, way cheaper. But I don't love bookkeeping at all. So I want a real live human who knows what they're talking about to help me with the stuff I don't understand. Probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me, though, the thing that put me over the top was that they could do my taxes and payroll also. So totally suggest checking them out. Go to their website, bookly.co, and check out their flat rates. I've been super happy with them. So now on to today's episode. Anthony's a 5-time Emmy Award winner. Go back to part 1 of the episode and catch Val's Tech, the business he's a partner in that's created a housing for taking your iPhone 6, 7, and 8 underwater, and you can actually feel confident it's not going to get wet. He's got a production company in New York. Really need to go back to part 1 and listen to all that stuff if you didn't catch it already. But Anthony, with this show being innovation and leadership, I want to talk about leadership for just 1 minute. It's not just helping other people, but in my experience, the best leaders were good followers, and they knew when to take advice. Can you talk a little bit about one of your mentors that you told me you got some advice that maybe some people might have thought about it as hard advice, but you feel like it really benefited your career?
Sure. I got into this business, or in the broadcast business, at 17 years old. It's what I wanted to do. So like right out of high school, I got into this business. There are quite a few men in this business, engineers and camera guys, that I would work under, and they would teach me how to wire things, what was the reason for it, show me once and do it. It was a great sink or swim situation. Here's a bunch of gear. Now head on over to that network and set it up. So I've learned from quite a few engineers, but one of them that rings in my mind every single day is a gentleman by the name of Ken Wise. Ironic to have a last name like that, but he said something to me. He would always tease me at 17 years old with my dialect at the time. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. So as you can imagine, the stereotypical either Brooklyn or Queens accent is something that I had at a younger age. So he had said to me, he goes, Tony, if you ever want to be taken seriously in this business, lose the accent. And I looked at him, and again, being a street kid from Queens, you would get offended by something like that. But I looked at him, and I knew he was right. So from that day on, I would listen to myself as I was talking, and really trying to just make a conscious effort to change my structure, change my sentence, or to take not the 10 seconds as we spoke in part 1, but just take a few seconds to see, how should I answer to this? And just with every single day, with practice or just acknowledgement of it, just being conscious about it, I was changing the way I was talking and speaking to a point now. I think now that the holidays are coming around, and I'll get together with some old friends from the neighborhood or from school, and I'll see them, and if I hear them talking with that heavy Queens accent, my God, it's like nails on a chalkboard. And I'm thinking, I sounded like that, or I can sound like that. Granted, enough drinks and I can bring that out right away. But I always made that conscious effort. And I'm thinking now in the professional world, if I was to have that accent, I wonder if I would have gotten as far. Would people have basically judged me by the way I spoke and not have taken me so seriously? Because if you look at it, I mean, if you listen to it, it's not the way we're used to. I've never heard of a businessman speaking like that, or just with a tone like, well, there's a few people I can think of now that speak with different tones, but not, I don't think people would have taken me as serious if I continue with that accent. So something that may have been offensive at 17, which I didn't find it, it was probably the biggest lesson in my life. Every single day I think of that.
You know, it's interesting, those things that take time and effort and work, and how many other folks don't pay that price for that conscious, you know, meaningful repetitions to rewire our brains, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, you know, how it pays dividends for so many decades afterwards, being willing
Yes.
to pay the price to acquire an uncommon skill set up front, right?
Yes.
Well, I want to talk about that in innovation. Can you tell us a bit about some of the things you invented before GoPros ever existed?
Sure. Well, back in, I think it was 1995, ESPN started the X Games. And I had made a contact over at ESPN, and they had asked, they told me one of the sports was going to be barefoot water skiing. And they asked if I had a POV, which is a point of view camera, small little camera that can fit on their jump ramp, and get this shot of the approach of the water skier approaching the ramp. So I lied and I said I had an underwater housing, but I didn't. But I had designed one probably a year or two for this company, Endless Pools. If you've ever seen their advertising of these swim at home kits, I had gotten a contact from a rep at that company if I could build or design an underwater camera. And I was young at the time. I was like, wow, this is great. And I just drew up a quick design and I faxed it to them, and I never heard back from them. So, however, I kept that design. And when ESPN asked if I could build a system, I quickly built it out of a flashlight housing, and it worked. And then they were like, well, we want to add another one for the next year. We want to show the approach and we want to show the passing. And is there anything else cool that you can think of? So back in the day, a lot's changed in the broadcast world, but they were throwing some money at me for R&D. And I played with putting a camera on a water ski rope and seeing what that angle would look like. And they loved it. And they threw me some R&D money to say, develop this.
So form factor, you know, for the rest of us trying to imagine what this looked like. How big are we talking about? How did it attach? How did that work?
The camera at that time was probably the size of an adult index finger.
Okay.
The camera itself, maybe a little smaller, maybe an adult pinky. And it had about 14 conductors and a cable. There were two variations. The thicker one was the one I used on that jump ramp. The smaller version, which was probably the size of a child's index finger or even smaller, was the one I built in what we called the rope cam at that time. So that, again, 14 conductors, as thin as a human hair. So you can imagine if there was a tug of war with this cable and it broke, you lost your picture. Now imagine pulling a water skier. So there's a lot of tension in that. And then that tension would go slack once it hit the jump ramp and then form this wavelength, this bow. And then as soon as that rider landed in the water, wow, you just snap that tension again. And you can snap these cables in. I mean, ski ropes would break. So I just developed a way of parallel strengthening the cable so that you can successfully pull a water skier and get this fantastic shot of them doing their tricks at the perspective at the base of the handle. At the same time, I also developed a wireless helmet cam system, pre-GoPro, no onboard recording on that one. And it was a wireless helmet cam signal. It would transmit a signal, standard definition at the time, to the boat, which I was riding in about 75 to 100 feet away. And then I would bounce that signal back to a transmitter so it would go live. I also built a helmet cam system with a record deck in a fanny pack, because again, there was no solid state recording at that time. So a lot of these were pre GoPro, all of these designs that came out. I've developed a system called the Bluefish. I worked on a system for U2's Bono, a Bono cam system, which was a small camera built into his glasses, and got a chance to wire up Bono with all this microwave. So the glasses, his perspective during his Elevation tour, I think this was in 2000, would be Bono's perspective and transmitted on all the large IMAG screens in the concert, and it even made the DVD cut.
That's fun. Well, even though there's new, fancier stuff out now, the principles of innovation still apply. You know, ideas are a dime a dozen. I think my favorite business conference I've ever been to is the Behance, that company that got bought by Adobe, the 99U conference in New York, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, inspiration is 1%, perspiration is 99%
Yes.
kind of approach, right? So, I had ideas for full suspension mountain bikes before they ever came out. I drew them up, right? But I didn't make my millions from it. So there's so many ideas. So many people think, oh, I've got it all figured out. Somebody should do that, or I should do that and make the money. But not only did you actually go make them, you obviously made them on the kind of time frame that ESPN could use them. I mean, think about every piece of technology, every real estate project. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a real estate project finish on time, right?
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about your approach and, getting past ideas to actually producing stuff, and obviously getting over all the hurdles and everything that goes wrong when anybody's ever inventing anything, but still getting it done on time so that they can use it in the X Games?
Sure. Well, one of the best things that I had going for me was understanding time deadline. And it's really hard in this world. I mean, we've all may have hired a software engineer or a programmer or somebody to build a website, and nothing was ever done on time. Well, when it's come to the broadcast, you have to be ready at the time that airs. There are no exceptions for the delay. So it's a matter of cracking the whip. Now, finding team members that understand that is very difficult, because you can get quoted to build a website and somebody's going to quote you for, I'll have that done in 2 months, and 2 months comes and goes and it's still not done. It's another 2 months and you're pulling your hair out of frustration. A lot of people don't understand time delays and they make false promises. Well, I was born with that. I mean, I guess from waking up early and having to deliver papers by a certain time so I can get to school at a certain time. It just becomes instinctual, and it's part of just repetitive growth and understanding. And likewise, moving into the broadcast world was the same thing. There are no delays. If you're not there for that 8 o'clock hour or whatever, you're not hired on the next job. So that just becomes a non-issue anymore. It's an understanding. Get it done on time. So finding the right team members that understand that is key. And it's still, I'll be honest with you.
Okay, so
let's preaching. Go ahead.
No, but let's talk about that, because I would love to hear how you sort through the people that interview well versus the ones that are actually going to be able to perform.
Well, and it's still difficult. Again, I'm preaching here, but sometimes it's still, when you're on a limited budget, especially our advertising budget when we started Val's Tech, and even still now, you count your pennies for advertising. So everybody says, for instance, that they're Facebook marketing campaign geniuses and this and that, and then you start to get into business with them, and then they're not even responding to their emails, or they send you something that's late and it's not even what you wanted. So the thing is, okay, you know what? You're gone. Next. And you have to let people know right away. So for instance, if you hire somebody who's going to do some software for you or a website or something like that, and they quote you, that's great. I'll be done in a month. Wonderful. If you're done in a month, you're going to get paid what we agreed on, and I'll probably even give you an extra $200, let's say, bonus. But if you're not, now you're costing me my time. So I'm only going to pay you 50% up front. If you're delayed, for every week that you're delayed, I'm going to start chipping away at that. If you understand, let's come up with an agreement. You need these people people need to be held accountable. We're all adults. If they quote you for something, unless you can understand there's a delay, but if the delay is the fact that they're not communicating, or now they had an issue, I'm sorry, I had all these other jobs and your job wasn't a priority and stuff then don't quote me if my job isn't the priority, or if you're not going to make it a priority. I have a lot of other jobs too, but everybody gets that equal amount of time. Just stick to your word. Your word is your bond in this industry and in most industries. But if people can't stick to that, as adults, we should be at that point where we do. There needs to be some sort of repercussion for that, because it can cost you.
Our sponsor for this episode of Innovation and Leadership is Skillshare. If you're not familiar with them, they're an online learning platform with over 18,000 classes on business and marketing and entrepreneurship and technology, and lots of other classes too, illustration, other things I'm interested in. They've given us a special offer where, for the listeners of our show, you can get 2 months for just 99 cents, where you can see all these 18,000 classes, unlimited access. It's Skillshare.com/leader. And I think what I like about them most is their high quality classes that are from high credibility instructors, content marketing right from Contently, or the one I took was last was email marketing right from MailChimp, where these are folks who are obviously seeing millions of other people's email marketing campaigns go out, so they really are kind of a high credibility source of information. So again, it's Skillshare.com/leader, 99 cents for complete access to all their courses for the next 2 months. One last time, Skillshare.com/LEADER. Thanks. It sounds like you build that in structurally and you have that conversation up front, so it's not a shock later when
Correct.
if they don't perform, they don't do it. It is interesting. I think about those folks where when they say something, I know I can count on it. It's interesting how much more business I'm willing to send their way, or I'm willing to sub out to them, or right that.
Correct.
That, when someone is deeply personally accountable, it's such a benefit. It's almost like a service to the people around them. And I know it's a magnet for me. Why do you think that there are so many of us who don't feel guilty for being late, or don't hold ourselves to that standard? Or why do you think sometimes we do and sometimes we don't?
I would like to say that this isn't like a millennial, because certainly you're going to see people say, well, millennials are like this. There's no repercussion. They feel like they're entitled to all this stuff, and that they were never punished as kids. But it's not millennials. It's Generation X, and it's even some of the older people as well. And I just don't know why. I wanted to say, as I was thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, maybe it's just because you hire the individual, the freelancer. If you go with a company, then you can report it to their higher ups, or their supervisor, saying, hey, this guy isn't working on this project the way he said he is. He's not delivering. I'm not happy. Get him off, bring someone else on so that they can get it done on time. When you hire a company, you pay a little bit more, but sometimes you get that. I think there's just so many people out there willing to work for nothing. I'm just trying to put my finger on it. I don't know if it was just a matter of how they grew up, but it seems to be almost a common thread for a lot of people. Everybody wants to market themselves and get the work, but once you give it to them, some of them just disappear.
Yeah, I used to be the guy who was like exactly on time, and so I would schedule things out and I would do everything to be exactly on time. But the problem is traffic would happen or things would happen, and I was apologizing for being late, know? And I think a turning point for me, and I haven't completely conquered this, but I had this mentor who ended up starting the private equity fund with me. And he just set an example for me of, he would show up almost everywhere 15 minutes early. Like a full 15 minutes. And his thing was that he was willing to waste his time to make sure he didn't waste anyone else's time. Yep. And I think just, enough years of that later, I just thought about how magnetic of an individual he was. And it's helped me, become more concerned about conquering my ADD and having seen it in someone else. Have you, as you've done so many things in your life, what's one of the other traits that's really magnetic for you business-wise? Hey, man, if someone is like this, that's easy for me to want to work with them ongoingly.
Sure. I was on a film shoot yesterday that we were shooting for a commercial for a Broadway show. And I was there, and I was just so happy seeing everybody on the crew who had no attachment to this project. But yet we were all like, when you were in high school and had high school shop class, or when you and your friends were building something in the garage or in the basement, whether it was a programming or just something, when you're all excited to contribute to something. And that was like that yesterday. I'm like, most of us don't even know each other, but we're all building something for the greater good here, just to make images between the lighting guys, the grips, the lighting guys, the director of photography, the clients, and just everybody was just excited yesterday. And I'm like, how wonderful is it just to show up every day and just, I'm going to contribute. I have no attachment besides getting a paycheck in a week for this job, but everybody was just excited about it. Let's just make this happen. And And it was just a beautiful flow. When everybody is like that and contributes like that, the end results are glorious. Do you know what I mean?
Actually,
And
yeah,
go ahead.
I know exactly what you mean. I'm thinking about another mentor of mine, a guy named Matt Ball. He was the print director for DreamWorks and out in LA when I lived out there. And he was just like genuinely excited about life all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's a guy with like 6 kids and a mortgage in LA. Like, it's not like the guy didn't have problems, right? Working at a major studio. And I remember asking him about it once, and he said, well, I just came to the conclusion that just because my day might be going bad doesn't give me the right to make your day any worse.
Wonderful.
And that guy is like one of the most magnetic humans I've ever met, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So as you're saying that, I'm just hearing Matt Ball in my head, you know? And it's interesting how contagious that is, though. Like, besides like the financial benefits of it being magnetic and people wanting to hire your company or you, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a service for other people because it becomes contagious for those around you, right?
Absolutely. You know, it puts me in not a dilemma, but I'm at a crossroads. I have my production company, which I love being out on projects. And I also, the development and manufacturing of the underwater housings. I'm like, I don't want to give up either to focus. So I'm trying to split in the middle and divide my time between both evenly because I'm excited about both of them. And if I can take on other little projects, I would as well, you know, but at the same time, you want to have a personal life, but you want to give that same level of attention and energy to both. If you can't do it, then it's okay to say, you know what, I gave it the best I could, and I'll put that one aside, as long as you take that leftover energy and focus it back on something else. You know, we live in a world where we do have ADD and we want to take on more than we can chew and stuff like that. And for most of us, we're constantly juggling as many projects as once. But as long as you can fully focus on that or give it the best attention that you possibly can, if you're going to you start half-assing things, then it's never going to mature properly. And the project deserves that.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's like an honesty issue, right?
Yep.
There's this Greg McKeown book called Essentialism, where he talks about, do you know a person who's got 10 minutes to get 10 minutes away and sits down and checks their email anyways? And I'm like, dang it, that's me, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to be the guy who's 15 minutes early. Or he talks about just basically like being honest that, you know, this next hour can only be spent once. And, you know, people who try to ride 2 bicycles usually end up on the street is kind of like what I think his point is, you know?
Yeah.
And for me, I want to do it all. And so I try to rationalize sometimes my lack of honesty of whether I can do that many things. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how hard it is to let something die so that something else can be great.
That's true.
But how rewarding eventually it is, right?
Well, I think some people just because you feel like you don't want to give up on something, thinking you don't want to be the quitter. Mm-hmm. But I think the better perspective is to say, do you know what? I was the one who tried, and at least I attempted it. You know, I got off the couch, or I had this idea, and whether you write it down on the piece of paper or create it, just get it out there somehow in the universe or on paper. And it's okay if it doesn't come to full fruition. At least you create it, you got it out there, or even told somebody about it. You know, just get it out there so that it exists in some form or another. The energy of it just being said in a sentence sometimes is enough. I can't tell you how many times I came up with so many ideas I had that never came to fruition. I never even pursued them. But then years later, I see a technology and someone will say, I remember when you told me about that. I'm like, yeah, well, at least I got it out. At least somebody remembered that I said that. And to me, that's it. Sometimes I build things to satisfy my own curiosity, and it can keep you up at night, but get it out somehow. If you can't build it, write it down, draw it, sketch it. Just get it out of your mind so that it exists in some sort of tangible form.
You know, it's
whether it's not, you know.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, like in the tech entrepreneur community, how there's been more of an embracing of failure, right? And sometimes people even say that failure is good, or they want to say that wasn't a failure, it was just a learning experience, right?
Sure. Sure.
And I don't think any one of us wants to fail any more than we need to. But something I heard this year that's really stuck with me is this idea of you don't need to pretend that failure is good, but you also, maybe you don't need to cry in your milk either, Jess. It was this idea. He said, and I wish I could remember who said it, but he said, even when we fail, we never seem to manage to fail all the way. And it's kind of this idea of,
it's true.
You are going to pick up something when you do it. And it's even if you don't get the result you want, maybe it's worth that investment, the compound interest of those investments over time, because you won't have failed all the way will have been better than, hey, I'm glad I didn't try that. I would have failed,
Sure.
Anyway.
Sure. I mean, it's tricky. Listen, we have a product right now with the iPhone housing. It's a great product. And I get emails every day from customers, and I'm looking on social media and I see their posting. It's wonderful. But at the same time, it's like, we're still looking for venture capital. We're still looking for some funding or merger that hasn't happened just yet. And, so trying to convince some of the partners like, well, we're failing here. No, we're not failing. We still have a product. It's out there. We had an idea and it exists. And people, even if one customer, and we just created a prototype and one customer is using it, we've succeeded. So yes, in the venture capital area and trying to get that funding and stuff like that, we'll get there.
Yeah.
And the more people know about the product and stuff like that, so it's kind of like, well, you need more venture capital to get more marketing, get the word out there. Well, right now, if we call it grassroots and consider it grassroots, it's getting there. And
but isn't that everything that's ever been invented, right? Is you've got the duck on top of the surface who's talking to the customers or the investors, and then the legs are frantically going underneath.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People are like that. They look beautiful on the outside, but underneath it's just this panic and, sometimes this struggle to stay afloat, know?
Yeah. Well, and if we haven't told everybody on this episode, like last episode, you really do need to go check out the housing. It's valstech.com, VALSTECH.com. And, this is a thing that will actually keep your iPhone dry if you want to go get those amazing underwater shots. But I want to, we're winding down here for the end of part 2. And it makes me think, have you heard of this book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things?
No, but I love the title.
It's a former CEO turned venture capitalist, Ben Horowitz, from the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz. Mm-hmm. And I love it so much. I mean, it's like partially like PTSD flashbacks of big business failures to read it. Mm-hmm. But he's so brutally honest about how many near-death experiences these big businesses, hundreds of millions of dollars type of businesses, how many near-death experiences they went through as he was CEO. And it's just brutally honest. But we all want to put the best foot forward, and that's okay. That's how we, nobody goes on a date and doesn't put their best foot forward if they actually like the individual they're going out with, right?
Correct.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, I'm a farm kid from Canada originally, and I compare it to driving fast on gravel. If you've ever driven a car really fast on loose gravel, it doesn't exactly go straight. It kind of weaves back and forth. And it's kind of the idea of hey man, as long as you keep it between the ditches, you're fine. The car doesn't actually need to be pointed completely straight as long as you can keep it between the ditches, and if that's a risk, you need to slow down if there's a risk of you not keeping it between the ditches, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So with all of that, kind of in closing here, what's either the best piece of advice you think you ever received, or the advice you wish you could go back and give a younger version of yourself?
I'm going to go with the second one.
Okay.
Because the best piece of advice, one of the best pieces of advice I told you earlier about losing the dialect or the accent. So the second one, going back to something earlier, I think I would have jumped on some of the real estate opportunities that came my way. I've invested like you in a lot of camera gear that seems to lose its value over time. Had I put that same money in some real estate, especially in New York at the time, I probably would have been a little bit more of a landlord today and have a lot of tenants, and at least had my money working for me. But I put my passion and what I wanted to do with photography forward. So I kind of invested that in myself just, like your college education, you'll get it back if you pursue a career in it. If not, it's an education and you pay for that experience. I paid for the experience.
Yeah.
But had I taken the same money and put it into real estate, I probably, with a lot of my other friends that I graduated with, that have these, luxurious homes, I'm happy in my apartment. My investment is myself and my experiences. I know a lot of people that do have taken that or put it into real estate, but at least I can actually say, I've done a lot. I've done a lot because I just put it back into the experiences or into my own curiosities.
Yeah.
And I'm happy with that. I have a daughter and I kind of teach her the same thing. Just use it wisely, make those decisions. But I would probably go back and just say, maybe splitting half of that and putting some of that into that real estate. Or at that time, as I had said, in part one, just listening for the 10 seconds. There's probably a lot of mistakes that I made by not pausing and reflecting and listening and jumping to answer something right away when I should have just taken the 10 seconds. Yeah. I can't get that back, but I know going forward I can exercise that.
So I think we have some similar advice we would give earlier selves. I had made enough money to retire in my 20s and lost it all, and then made enough again and lost it all twice. So I made enough in my 20s and lost it all twice. And I look back, and now I've become such a devotee of Warren Buffett, buy an income producing asset, buy a future income stream instead of buying hopes and dreams and crystal ball predictions. Right. And at the same time, like, it's easy to woulda, coulda, shoulda for me. And then there's okay, what am I going to do going forward about it? And, literally yesterday, my wife and I were talking about, should we look at buying self-storage units? And is that something that we want to be a part of? And kind of that, I don't know, I saw a picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger yesterday with his shirt off, and the guy's obviously been hitting the gym again. And it says, Arnold Schwarzenegger at 70, age is just a number kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes.
And I think we worship the Mark Zuckerberg billionaire by 30 kind of thing. And we don't always recognize Colonel Sanders was in his 60s before he built one of the biggest entrepreneurial chains in history, right?
Sure.
So, interesting. That's where you went with it. So we've got one more thing in common.
I really appreciate the time you gave me for both parts of this interview. I look forward to hearing it myself.
We'll appreciate your time and thanks for making cool stuff.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's it for the episode. One other thing I wanted to tell you about, if you'll remember the guys from Convoy in episodes back, Ken Free and Trent Mano, I went on one of their CEO trips to New York and I met a guy named Brent Thompson, very successful entrepreneur. He was former CEO of Jive Communications, big company now, I think $300 or $400 million. Anyways, he started a new company called blipbillboards.com. I'm super stoked they're a sponsor now. But I remember a year and some ago when I met him, I thought it was genius. Instead of having to buy 6 months or a year's worth of billboard for thousands of dollars, you can buy 8 seconds at a time for 10 or 20 cents. You pick what billboard you want it on, what time of day you want it to run, and it just puts so much power in the hands of marketers and CEOs who want to try something and see if it works. You can buy as many or as few as you want, change it as many times as you want. I think now our podcast is being advertised on billboards in 18 different states because we have these guys as sponsors. We're pretty excited about it. Hope you check out blipbillboards.com. Thanks.